What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso. Friday, AM coffee as your Labor Day weekend kicks off. We are dangerously close to week one. There's a huge collection of Discord questions that are backlogged that I'm going to answer right now. If you haven't yet, catch up with yesterday's Buck the Trend featuring Dan and Greg. The ongoing Moments bracket series has been awesome. Paul and Will did a nice sicko 30 minutes on the waiver wire claim, so we got you all up to date on the 53-man roster. We'll have some content throughout the weekend, and then we're into game week. So Connor and I recording at the top of next week. Pod War Room, we'll have Jet Heads at the top of the week. I will be there for Jet Steelers in the building. Still figuring out our game day strategy, but there's the live shows in the rearview mirror. We're going to post a whole live show over the weekend on the feed. So if you're not subscribed to War Room, go subscribe to War Room so you can see the whole show because there's plenty of season preview talking there. And now we're on to going to Jet Steelers, going to London. I got a new T-shirt live at badlandstoj.com. I called Paul for 8 minutes today, and I tick through 37 things we have going on just like that. In a good way. It's exciting. So let me dive into these questions. Go 12 or 13 minutes. As you can see, I'm not in my standard location. I'm in Rhode Island for the weekend. There's a telescope in the back of the room. I'm disrupting the people in the other room who are trying to watch some Big Ten football, so I will keep it quick. First one from Kenon Bass. How you guys feeling about wide receiver? Are you surprised or annoyed headed into week one with how they addressed or didn't address it? I wouldn't say I'm surprised. I feel like last week when we discussed this, I said I had pretty tempered expectations for them to do anything at receiver. I thought the addition was more likely to be a tight end, which ultimately they did make with Jelani Woods, who, to be fair, is really more of a glorified receiver than a tight end in my mind. We'll see. I just think this team is going to be so run heavy. I didn't see them doing something that bold at the wide receiver position. I think they're going to throw the ball a lot to Breece Hall. I think they're going to throw the ball a lot to Mason Taylor. I think they're going to throw the ball a lot to Braylon Allen. And they just – look, I'm not saying I agree with it. The group is weak on paper. It's very weak. Once you get past Garrett Wilson, all the guys that everyone was worried about, sticking on the roster are still in the organization and available on the practice squad to be moved up. And maybe that kind of speaks to what the league thinks of guys like Skinner and Brandon Smith and Pritchett and Tyler Johnson. Maybe of those four, one of them could contribute at some point this year. Mathematically, that's probably the best you're hoping for. I was tweeting about this a little today. I think when you look at reps week one, and this is a guess, we don't know. It's a new coaching staff. All right, we'll have the running back rotation. Maybe Breece plays 60% of the snaps. Braylon plays 30. Isaiah Davis plays 10, give or take. And there's some sets where there's two or three of them out there together. Figure Garrett's going to play about every snap. Mason Taylor's going to play about every snap. Maybe Reynolds plays 70% of the snaps. And after that, is it Stone Smart and Beck playing 40% in more run-heavy looks overall? Arian Smith maybe playing 8 to 10 snaps and going deep once a quarter. And then maybe some very limited situational work for a guy like Lazard or another receiver if they elevate Tyler Johnson. I just think the guys in the receiver room who are going to get reps is going to be very limited, for better or worse. So I'm not surprised. I think the depth chart is going to be a work in progress in the early parts of the Glenn Mougie tenure. It's not pretty on paper, though, and they're betting on their running backs, and they're betting on Mason Taylor being good right away. And Stone Smart, they're probably, and again, maybe he plays 0 snaps week one. Just based on his athletic profile, I do wonder if he's going to be a bit more involved in the passing game than maybe we all expect. I got a couple from Izzy here, almost enough where we're just going to do our own mailbag of Izzy questions. Asking about the new jerseys that were released today, asking about the Jets captains. I think the jerseys are cool. I mean, I'm not a huge jersey guy at this stage. Now, I will get back into being one with the kids now starting to get them. They each got a nice, fresh Garrett Wilson jersey, which I like. It was cool to get back into the habit. I personally, obviously, I'm just wearing random shirts like this in our Badlands gear. I like them, though. They pop a little bit. They're certainly better than the stuff we've been dealing with during the case year. So, and I think their reception has been positive from what I've seen. It seems like fans like them a lot. I'm just happy they made the sort of generalized transition back away from the Gotham Green era. That's the happiest news I've seen on the jersey front. And, if I were to buy a jersey right now, I'd probably mirror my kids and get a Garrett Wilson or Sauce Gardner jersey. Those are safe bets. They'd be here for a while. So I like them. The captains, there wasn't anything shocking here. Obviously, it's a good sign that Fields is a captain. It's a good sign a guy like Garrett's a captain. It's not a shock someone like Sherwood and Quinnen are captains after being paid in their tenure here. Maybe the two mild surprises were McCrary Ball, who's there for special teams purposes, and you don't always want to only have big names be your captains. And AVT, I thought was interesting, right? And we've seen Glenn go out of his way to speak highly about AVT and getting him an extension, and now to see him at a captain level, it makes me think if we have to guess who's getting the next extension here, AVT is a good guess. And I think if he's healthy and he starts the year off strong, that could be something that happens in like October or November. And again, I think the Jets internally want to keep that dude around, and this only further puts fuel on that fire. So interesting to see. My only reaction to it was, I feel that much stronger that AVT is probably going to get an extension from this regime sooner rather than later. Let's see here from scrolling up from David. What did Samini do to Glenn when he was a player to elicit such payback every time he asked a question? I think, and I can't say I know for a fact, but I have a hunch. I think this is a good-natured thing. I think those guys actually have a good relationship and a good amount of respect for each other. And it's a little bit of Glenn breaking his balls and giving him a hard time just because he can right now. I wouldn't read too much into it. And I think Glenn generally has been fine to good with the press. I don't like some of the Titman-Myers silliness and kind of overplaying, hiding who the center is going to be. Maybe there's some real injury concerns with Simpson, and both of those guys are going to be starting week one, but I feel like Simpson's going to be fine and probably start. I don't know what competitive advantage you're really getting by hiding your starting center. Hopefully it's just Titman. But beyond that, I think Glenn has been good with the press. Direct and sometimes abrupt, but good with injuries, good on transparency with that. It's early, and he will learn and evolve throughout this time. But I don't think there's anything there with him or Rich. I actually think there's a healthy amount of respect there. From Hudson Jet, with the addition of Jelani Woods, our guy, getting a lot of hype this week, and the decision to keep Lazard, we now have 7 pass catchers between 6'3" and 6'7", besides helping in the run game. Does this increase the catch radius on 50-50 win rate, also help mitigate some of the field's accuracy problems? It's an interesting thought. I don't disagree with it, right? Fields definitely has concerns about his accuracy, and when you have an inaccurate quarterback, giving him really big targets is not a bad idea. It's overly simplified, but it makes sense, and it's not a bad idea. And I like the claim of Woods. That's exactly the kind of guy you throw a dart on at receiver, someone who bluntly has more upside in this league than Ruckert. I would have moved Ruckert off the roster before I moved Tyler Johnson, who I think ultimately will make it back anyway. But I was intrigued by that one. And I think there's some potential there. I'm tempering my expectations, but I do think it's intentional. The Jets have so much size across the board. Both, they're going to be a run-heavy team. They want guys, big bodies who can get in the way and help clear space for their running backs, but also to just have a bigger catch radius for Justin Fields makes sense. And I'm curious if a guy like Woods can work himself into a red zone package with a guy like Stone Smart, where the Jets are just going to have, a basketball team out there, and can Fields take advantage of that, or even just have them help spread the field and then he could take off and run. So it was a good shout and a good observation. This one from Sean Ellis, getting a twinge of solid JD energy with the weird secret center competition and now hyping up Xavier Gibson and some other curious lower roster moves. Tyler Johnson, am I overreacting, or is something going off here? And there was also another question about surprised about Tyler Johnson, also from Izzy. I think ultimately with Johnson, this was a veteran cap thing, and they were able to immediately get him on the practice squad. And it would not shock me if he's elevated game day or the day before game day pretty consistently, depending on the matchup. So he's in the org. I'm still a little mildly surprised that's who they did the roster gymnastics with. But, if he was on the roster, you're looking at a guy who's probably playing 7 snaps a game and maybe getting 1 target every other week. So I'm not going to get too worked up about it either way, and I do think he will play games for the Jets this year. As I said, I'm not crazy about the center stuff. I think it's a little silly, and just say who the starting center is, and the charade will be over in a few days in either direction. Hopefully it's Tippmann starting. The Gibson stuff, I don't generally have a problem with a GM and a coach hyping up one of their players going into the season publicly. There's no downside to that, and they know the players see that stuff, so expressing confidence, it's not a bad thing. Look, I disagree with it. I think if you listen to this podcast, you know how I and Connor and others feel about how Gibson played last year. I just think he was a very mediocre returner. Now, Glenn's point is that you guys are only seeing, certain practices and preseason games, and he caught every single punt in practice. He caught 145 in a row. I kind of understand a rookie coaching staff wanting a veteran punt returner, which Gibson is at this point. He's caught a lot of punts in the NFL in a lot of different situations, versus Pritchett, who is an undrafted rookie and could be more prone to mistakes. To be fair, Gibson was an undrafted rookie at one point as well. And Pritchett had a muff that probably stuck in the coaching staff head in the last preseason game. That's an overreaction to one play, but is there a thought that, man, when the bright lights go on or if it's windy Sunday at 1 o'clock and he's never caught a punt in the NFL, wouldn't we feel better with a guy who's fielded 100 punts in the league already? I'm not saying it's the right decision and the jury's out on it with Gibson because he was not good last year, but maybe with Banjo, maybe with some coaching, maybe he's a competent punt returner until a better option reveals itself, or they didn't think there was someone out there who could be an upgrade. Because we've seen them go do upgrades proactively. They fixed kicker with Nick Folk. They fixed D tackle with Phillips and Briggs. Clearly, they didn't think anyone was available to get out there who would be better or more reliable than Gibson, which I disagree with that decision until I see it proved otherwise. And look, hopefully, I don't expect Gibson to be some electric punt returner, but can he not field punts that are going to bounce into the end zone, keep his heels at the 10-yard line? Can he catch everything? I don't think there's a role for him on offense in anywhere, and he should not be returning kicks. But let's see, right? I don't love it. I'm more bummed about a guy like Clemens being a third edge than I am about Gibson in this role for now. But let's see how it shakes out. Next ones, let's see if we almost hit them all here. A lot of Don LaGreca ranting about Glenn. And a lot of reactions to how he's been talking to the media. But I think most of this stuff is a bit overbaked right now. I don't think it's anything to overreact about too much, especially if the Jets show up ready to play next Sunday. If they don't, different conversation. Next one from JP Waxer. Where are the chunk plays coming from? Who or should we expect lots of 11-play drives and field goals? Probably not crazy to expect a lot of 11-play drives and field goals. I think the drive where the Jets ran the ball, like 10 of the 12 plays against the Giants, kicked a field goal, is probably something you're going to see a good amount this year. Or hopefully the drive you saw against the Packers, where they had some smart, well-designed short passes, and then Fields ripped off a chunk play and scored a touchdown. The Jets' chunk plays are probably going to come off script from Justin Fields running when things break down. They're going to come once a half, taking a deep shot to Garrett Wilson, or maybe once a quarter, once a game, taking that deep shot to Arian Smith, and then Breece Hall. Like, Breece Hall is capable of having chunk plays. You set him up on a screen. Just dump one off to him. Look what he did against the Steelers last year. Go look at his catch and run against the Steelers last year. That's where some of their chunk plays could come from. Braylon Allen also has that capability as well. So they're not short on guys who can break tackles and make big plays. Breece can do that. Braylon could do that. Garrett Wilson could do that. They can bomb the ball up to Garrett and Arian Smith periodically and see where it lands. And Fields, is the kind of guy athletically, 3rd and 6, he breaks the pocket and breaks the tackle from safety, could take off for a 40-yard run. Like, he's done it plenty of times in his career. So there's people there who can do it, but I do think the standard Jets drive this year is not going to be, 4 plays. It's going to be like 12, 13 plays. And my hope is they can be the 17th or 18th best offense in the league and not the 29th best offense in the league. I'm trying to be realistic and pragmatic with expectations for them. Next one and last one from Michael G. Which new Jet scores a touchdown first? Taylor, Reynolds, Johnson, Smart, Arian Smith, Beck. What a great question. And I can't wait to do some random first touchdown of the season bets next week. Taylor is the safest bet, right? You're going to go to the tight end in the red zone. Taylor's probably going to be 3rd on the team in targets. Would not shock me at all if Taylor had the first touchdown of the season or had a touchdown within the first game or two. I think he's the safest bet by a decent amount. You fall back, you never know with Beck. We saw a little bit of it in the Packers game, but Taylor is definitely the safest bet on this list overall. A couple questions about going to get Tim Patrick. That didn't happen, but ultimately at this phase, I don't know how much of a difference he would have made as the 4th or 5th receiver. And last but not least, from Gnome, did anyone declare who the David Clowney Award winner was, and why is it Austin McNamara? I mean, at least with McNamara, right? He's going to be the punter. He looked great all preseason. The Clowney Award winner was probably a guy like Brandon Smith, who ended up on the practice squad. Now, Clowney in 2009 was on the active roster, scored a touchdown in the Raiders game, played a little bit here and there. So that could still end up being a Brandon Smith at some point, right? He get called up from the practice squad and make some plays. Same with Pritchett. I'm happy with McNamara, though, because Jets might have a great punter. And I'd like to think they're not going to punt a lot, but there's going to be plenty of weeks they punt a lot. So having a good punter is not a bad thing. A nice Friday mailbag. Everyone enjoy the weekend. Enjoy some time with your family. Check out badlandstoj.com. Get some t-shirts. I'll be answering questions on Discord and Twitter Saturday morning, as I always am. We'll upload the live show throughout the weekend. At some point, we'll have something else that hits before we get into the Jets Head flagship pod, War Room Rhythm of Week 1. And then we'll share some details about where some of us will be hanging out at MetLife Stadium. Oh, man, it's like 9 days away. We finally made it. So thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.